be
Yeah.
it'll be stupendous.
Well, and I always like finance because I like our cool updates. So I think
Well,
that's
I've been really looking forward to this first presentation, and yeah, this is well, it's all really good, but this the USIMS is a, a major project, and that I mean my term will end when before it's completely rolled out, which will be kind of sad. But there will be probably a couple of the lanes on the 4-lane highway that I call it that will be opened up. So.
well, and we got land trust online last month, so that was wonderful.
We'll make sure you get a personal tour of it when it's done.
He'll be on his next term. He'll still be here.
That's true.
I don't think it'll ever truly be done.
No, there's always work to do, but hopefully the majority.
Betterments, right, Mark? Betterments.
It's like teaching school.
Yes. Okay. I think we have.
That's the most I've seen.
I think we're.
I know. I almost thought her probably then I'm like, I don't know which one it was.
I think we're short Jim, aren't we?
Yes.
Well, we're going to get started because it's a little bit past our start time. Can someone? You know what? I'll shoot him a text here in a minute. Hey, I want to
Here,
welcome.
I can do that.
Okay.
He's on.
He's here.
There he is. We're worrying about you.
I apologize. I have a client meeting at 2:30 and I had to find a spot near that site. And so here I am. I'm going to mute my video, but I'm with you.
All right. You better get some sunscreen, my friend. Find some shade. All right. Well, thank you. I want to welcome everyone to Finance today. We've got a pretty good agenda. We want to welcome our new committee member, board member Stacy Hutchings. She dove right in yesterday on a big marathon board meeting. So we don't have a lot of those, but occasionally they're there. And thank you for enduring, and welcome to Finance. You know, some people call it finance, we call it finance.
I like the attitude. That's great.
It's always good. Want to make sure we I excuse Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. He looks forward to finance every month, and he's surrounded by great staff and he's absent today, and we hope the best, and he takes care and he's safe, but the staff is ready to support this committee today, and well, let's just get right to business. We also have other folks that will be joining us. I don't have anybody that's wanted to make public comment or sign up or reach out. That I'll be mindful of that as we move through our agenda. So the first item on our agenda is information. And beginning of our finance meetings, we like to recognize our achievement and progress and improvements. This particular meeting, we'll have a program report on our USIMS, and we have Katrina Brinkley with us, who's our USIMS project manager, and we also have Jared Felt, the director of information. And so this is this is a big look and not just a every month update. And so we'll turn the time over to you, Katrina. You're driving this, aren't you? Or you're leading is that correct, Jared?
That's correct.
All right.
Thank you. Katrina Brinkley, Chief Product Owner and Program Manager for USIMS. This is a review. We provide the PDF, the information on a monthly basis, but every quarter we dive down into what is going on with USIMS and give a verbal information. So this is my first time doing it, so be kind to me, please. We'll start off. If you could scroll down, please, Jeff. Just a quick overview of what we're covering. We're going to talk about what the USIMS initiative is, how our organization is set up, the upcoming roadmap, give you our overview, talk about financials, because I know that's what everybody really wants to hear, and tell you about the upcoming events. Next, please. So this, forgive me, it's a little, yeah, there we go, thank you. This is what our current systems are looking like. You can see here that Cactus is kind of the center of all things crazy. And we've got integrations. I think there's 32 different systems here that are all talking with each other, working with each other. There's redundancies in places. Some places we have to literally create copies or snapshots of items because we don't have another solution for it. And this is what we're currently working with. Go to the next page, please. This is our goal. This is what USIMS is hopefully going to look like as far as systems and integrations go. You can see that it's broken down into 4 different sections here. We've got the educator, the LEA staff section, which includes the USIMS Educate, which is our teacher portal. We've got the finance section, and then we've got the student data section. The student data section is the one that we just spun up in the last couple of months. This is our goal. We're going from that crazy spaghetti mess to something that looks similar to this. Next, please. And how we're going to do that. The USIMS initiative was originally created to replace all of that mess. We want something that is focused on educators, on student, and on the financial aspects of the board's requirements. We're going to focus on being cloud-based, which gives us that continuity, the scalability to be as large as we need to or as small as we need to at any given time. And it gives us availability, that uptime that's very important to everyone. Our architecture is going to be completely restructured. We're not replacing systems, we're reimagining them. So this allows us to really meet the needs of our users and the needs of our educators, our LEAs, and our students. We're also reducing redundancy within the systems, pulling out that information so we don't have 9 different places that you're going for the same data. Right now we have this student IDs that are, the state student IDs that are throughout the system at least 3 or 4 times. In every area that you go, you get different information about it. So we're bringing that all into one so that you can get that information and in one place at one time. And it'll be more of a global view than having to log into 9 different systems. Now we're also creating some automation behind it so that when we are releasing, there's automated testing, there's automation of reports, there's automation of everything we possibly can automate so that there's less room for human error. We're also focusing on data collections and reporting. As I mentioned, we're creating automation for much of that. And we're hoping that that data collection and reporting will really get easier. We're not hoping, we're going to make it easier. As time goes on, as USIMS pulls up everything, you'll be able to log in and get those financial reports, get your student reports, your LEA reports, whatever you need to get your job done will be in one central location. Next, please. So how we're doing that. This is how we've set up our organization for the USIMS deployments. We have the Functional Advisory Board. We just had that meeting this last Tuesday. And that meeting consists of a large group of stakeholders and non-stakeholders. It's a public forum where we've invited anyone who'd like information about USIMS to come and hear about what we're working on, what we're releasing, what's upcoming in our roadmap. If you'd like to be involved, please contact me. I'm happy to get you invited to that meeting. But as part of that meeting, we pull volunteers from there for our focus working group. And our focus working groups are really they're the meat of what we're working on. They're who we're talking to. They're our subject matter experts. who are really telling us what's going on in the systems, why they exist, what they could accomplish or should accomplish. And from those focus working group meetings, our Scrum teams, our USIMS PM and Scrum team down there with the little blue circles, they're pulling those requirements and actually creating the systems. Next, please. This is a high level of what our roadmap currently looks like. I will, just for your information, be changing this slide next month. We're going to get something that's a little bit more in depth. This is a super high level, but it gives you information on what we're working on. So we started the educator management group about a year ago now, and they are just getting ready for their first release. The student data group has been going for about 4 months now, and we'll be spinning up a financial data group this summer. Next slide, please. And this is what you're all really looking for. This is the current status of everyone. Our student team is working on hiring another developer. We recently got a second developer. I guess I should start with, we're working on USIMS. We're trying to get things done. That's the initiative, obviously. And then our student team, they've started their backlog grooming. Backlog is a list of priorities for them to do. And they're working on their focus working group. They've done what's the word I want? They've done what's called event storming, which is where they take all of their subject matter experts and their developers, and they go through the systems that they're trying to understand, and they really map it down to these events that happen within the system. And that allows us to pull some requirements that maybe the subject matter experts weren't aware that existed, and it allows us to have conversations about the different board rules that are shaping the formation. Right now they're focusing on SSID and what happens behind the scenes there, and we'll be moving on shortly to UTREX. So they're really excited to get that done. The educator team is on target currently for a May 24th production release. This will be a limited release. They're inviting specific members from the focus working group to act as kind of a beta tester, to go log in and see what's going on with the first version of USIMS. This will be educator licensing. They've been working closely with Dr. Malia Height on getting something created that the teaching and learning group will really be able to streamline educator licensing. Sorry, I'm losing my words. Our next steps are to hire those student domain developers I talked about, and we're going to be working on a program increment or product increment conversation about what our next release is going to look like after this educator licensing. We'll also be working on completing subsumption of the Utah Interactive components, which allows us to really complete educator licensing. Right now, it's a specific subset. It's got some of the background checking in it, but we still need some UPAC information and a couple of other pieces to really subsume that entire Utah Interactive section. And onto our issues and risks. We've really struggled with a couple of things. One is those event storming system processes that I spoke about. Remote is really difficult to get everybody together and to have open, unique, transparent conversations that have multiple inputs. On remote, you have one person talking, and when people talk over each other, it gets weird. You have to okay, who's first? How's this going? Whereas if we were all in a room together, we can split off into our groups and we can put sticky notes on a wall and we can have 15 conversations at one time. So it's taken us a little longer to do those event storming processes, but I think we're finally getting the hang of doing it over remote, and the team is really getting on board. We've also been working on documenting some business practices and processes that haven't previously been done. So that has been a learning curve in itself as well. We've also been working on training the USBE staff on agile practices. This is something that we identified early on as a necessity in order for us to really release something that's custom for our users, for educators, our students, and our LEAs. We need to be able to pivot. We need to be able to adjust to the needs and requirements And agile development is the fastest and the easiest way to do that. It allows us to really close a feedback loop so that we can have conversations directly with our users. As soon as we put a release out, we're working with our focus working group and they're going to give us feedback on that release. And we can take that back and make changes to it within a day or a week rather than going through a whole change review process. And that's something that we've had to change and have conversations about. And we're still working on that. We create agile minutes. We have conversations with everyone. So that goes into the mitigation of how we're talking with people and working through training on those agile practices. We're also working on hiring additional staff. We're running a little shorthanded, and you'll see as we get to the financials that we're actually under budget. We don't have the staff that we were expecting at this point in time, but we're hiring and we'll get on board quicker. So,
I've got one
yes.
question from a board member, and so
Oh yeah, interrupt me anytime. What?
I have to do with something you did previously. We're talking about Member Moss.
Thanks, Chair. This might be a broader question. We asked it last month as well. I'm just curious what you're hearing about a return to the office. That, you know, there's a lot of things that are easier done in person, and you mentioned one of them. Now that we're getting vaccinated and schools are in person, is there a roadmap to have folks back in there? Again, I realize that might be a much broader conversation, a couple pay levels up from both of us, but just curious what you're hearing.
So Katrina, if you don't mind, Chair Huntsman, if I could take that question.
Yeah, Jared Felt.
So Jared Felt, USBE IT Director, good question. So a lot of this is still even, at a higher level than me. We're working on, as a leadership team overall at USBE, working on the policy for what that looks like to return to the office. But I believe the date is set for July 6th to return in a kind of a hybrid mode. That's due to change depending on leadership and how that all fleshes out, but that's the plan, and going to Katrina's point, that will help our teams out in getting back into the office. And, you know, it'll be a staggered approach. So we'll work, you know, so we ensure that teams are in the office together at the same time. We have multiple teams. So we're, you know, that's part of our planning process as we go throughout this next couple months.
And I'd like to mention.
Oh, go ahead, Katrina.
I'd like to mention that it's really only for the event storming, for the large group conversations that we're struggling with the remote work. On the other hand, most developers are well situated for remote work, and it actually suits them to be able to function remotely. So it's really only those event stormings that kind of handicaps us in a way of getting that information in a quicker method.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's part of, I think, if fun is not an inappropriate word, the fun part of post-COVID, once we get there, will be, okay, now what works better remotely, and where do we need to get together? And I'm hoping those things that are better together, we can get back into that. But thanks for the update. Let's hope that works. Thank you.
If I might add on the collaboration piece, when on some of those slides, there's a lot of stakeholders out there for efficiency purposes, and that they're wanting that, like, not really remote, but using technology and of where we've been through this COVID space. And so I think that's really going to help things streamline through this evolution. So there's good to have those teams physically together and that, and then there's also the benefit of bringing stakeholders together in a very easy and efficient way.
Right.
So it's all part of the strategic part of it. And well, I don't think Jared brought this out. Also on the building side, there's some things happening with the building, outside the building, that they're trying to hurry and get done to get things into compliance. There's some ADA stuff. If I remember right, I think Cammie can probably speak more to everything that's on that list, but those are all on the priorities for back in the building. So Katrina, please continue.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the questions. We can go on to the next slide, please. Next page, I guess. So financials. This is a format that was previously done, and in my opinion, I am actually thinking that I'm going to add some burn down charts for everyone so that we can see what the actual burn down looks like. This doesn't really give you a gut check on whether we're over or under. It just kind of gives you some numbers. So you can see here, we haven't spent nearly even half of the budget. We are on under budget at the moment. If you scroll down to the next one, it'll actually give us some pie charts that make a little bit more sense. So you can see that we've used our cactus funding. We will be rerouting the cactus team, which is known as CRUDS, over to the USIMS development on June 1st. So we're excited about getting some more developers in there and getting them some really hands-on experience. They've been working cactus, goodness, for at least a couple years between them. I think they've got quite a bit of experience, and we're excited to get that on the USIMS team. So you can see the funding, we've got quite a bit remaining. That encumbered to date, it doesn't mean that we have spent it. It means we have plans for it, but it's not yet spent. So we've still got quite a bit in the budget. Any questions on these slides before I move on?
Katrina,
Your hand raised.
Jared, do
Sorry.
you care if I add? I just wanted to point
me.
something out. So Katrina touched on the challenge of hiring. That has been a challenge due to the area that we live in, you know, and the competition, and then the salaries associated with that. So we continually put positions out there. You know, we want to hire the rock stars, and so sometimes we have to pass on all applicants, and so that's been a challenge as well. And so we're working to, you know, keep that pipeline going. But that's a lot. That factors into a lot of why we haven't spent as much as we have planned on doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions out there?
Is this your last slide?
One more. If you want to scroll down to the next one, please. These are our upcoming events. We have focus working groups that happen every other Tuesday for the educator team and every Monday morning for the student team. And they have sprint reviews, which is a time where they show off what they've accomplished in that sprint. It's also a time that they gather feedback from the focus working group about what they're working on, and they can start that feedback loop and really closing it down. We also had a functional advisory board meeting that happened on Tuesday. And I didn't list on here, but we will have a production release coming up shortly. That will be by the 24th of May. And as I mentioned, that's a limited release to the educator focus working group. And that is it for me.
So appreciate the update. It seemed like it was just a couple of weeks ago we were updating some legislators on USIMS. Katrina and Jared, you were there. And it was interesting on the update that they were, I think they were somewhat surprised that we're on task and on budget and not looking for a legislative ask. And that's been the goal and the strategy since the start, and that to look for efficiency. One of the best way to describe the evolution of in that particular meeting, and this will kind of help bring things into the right context for those that are listening and also our finance committee members, is a lot of the work that has been done, the groundwork, foundation work of the way this infrastructure and how this system is going to work is I liken it into what all of us have been seeing UDOT do with their road construction when they're adding lanes and et cetera, or making these improvements. And where we're at within the USIMS world is we've been laying all the foundation and the groundwork, and we're really close to getting the first lane open. And there's going to be some things learning as we're preparing the lane 2, lane 3. There's 4 areas there, and then that fourth area is similar to the 4th lane. And so I'm really, really excited now to get that first lane open, have the collaboration and working within that system with our different stakeholders. And then that will just help us, will help our developers in that as they're moving into those second, third, and fourth priorities. So it's just a little bit of background, but every month we get a little bit of a Reader's Digest version of this quarterly report. So is there any questions from committee members on our USIMS update? Okay, thank you. Good report. Next, we're going to go to item number 2, request for data and information. Do we have any requests?
We actually have in here the draft of the subrecipient grant policy.
Yes, I'm bringing it up also on my screen. Do you want to, are you going to speak to that?
I don't know that there's, again, it's just, this is in draft mode. In talking to Director Lee, they've got one more, they just sent this back to Moss Adams, and they've got kind of one more round of going through it one more time to address, you know, just cleanup work basically. And then this should be ready, hopefully by the next June meeting, it'll be finalized and posted.
And this is the monitoring.
Uh-huh.
You guys haven't opened this up.
Right.
So did you say you think it will be back by when?
Hopefully by June. I believe that that's the idea. It should be finalized by June. The other piece of this I am aware of, I just got the meeting invite, is Moss Adams is ready to start on the internal HR policies. We actually have a meeting scheduled with them in a couple weeks. I believe it's not this next upcoming Thursday, but the following Thursday, to start that process. So we're kind of closing out the financial policies and gearing up for the HR policies.
All of this policy work with who we contract with Moss Adams is try to get all of this done while you're also trying to run things at USBE and getting payments out and everything else. So it's again, we want to make sure that the board's informed on the progress of those internal betterments as they're rolling out. Any other board member Moss?
Thanks, Chair. Question on the grant fiscal compliance and monitoring, and this is just informational. This question came up a little bit when we were talking about reporting in Representative Pulsifer's task force a while back, and I know it trying to find a part. The subrecipients may be monitored on a cyclical basis or risk basis. So, as I understand it, there's some judgment that goes into determining which subrecipients should be monitored and how often. I'm just curious what that looks like practically. How many of the subrecipients end up being monitored based on risk assessment, and how frequently is that done? What does that kind of look like, given that there's some discretion in the system? What's kind of the on the ground view of how that works?
Well, at this time, as you know, we're in the process of hiring the actual fiscal monitor manager. We did have one for a brief time. He's left for other opportunities. So I believe they're next week. They're actually holding interviews for that. This team is fairly new. And so they're still kind of working through all of those processes. We found that, you know, fiscal monitors out in the different sections and with different grants, there's different ways of monitoring, different processes, different requirements in which they have to monitor. And so we've now pulled them together in one team in hopes of getting some consistency and helping to take some of that burden off of the LEAs, having multiple fiscal monitors coming in for different grants at different times. So again, they're still kind of working through those processes, determining how they're going to identify particular LEAs or particular grants, and just kind of work through those processes. So those are still upcoming. And I think this policy is just part of that, starting that process.
Did you have a follow-up?
No, thanks, Deborah. That's very helpful. Do you know how many fiscal monitors there were before? That's probably been on a chart that you've shown us, but I apologize. I lost track.
Official fiscal monitors, I believe there were 5 that we've pulled in from other sections. And I don't know if Director Lee has made it on yet. He had another engagement. But I believe there were 5 that we've pulled from other sections in.
Gotcha. Thank you. I remember discussion about that, but I think that sounds like something that'll be welcome at the LEAs. Thank you, Deborah.
You bet.
Well, and the other piece of this as it's being determined is for the dollars and the expectations that we have on the monitoring side, we need to find as much efficiency in our USBE policies as we're trying to get efficiency from the LEA side, or we can't get the work done. And so it's kind of a win-win as this is evolving, so that we can be accountable on our side and try to get some work done. But the more efficient we are in our communication and with our approach to the LEAs, they win and we win. So I think that's all to be determined here shortly.
Yeah, amen.
Okay. Any other questions on our item number 2? Well, appreciate these updates. Deborah, do you have anything else you wanted to share on?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. The next item is an actionable item. Agenda item number 3. It's R277607. Clarissa, who's taking point on this?
I can start on it, Chair.
Okay, why don't you start?
Thank you. Jeff Van Holten, Director of Public Affairs for the Utah State Board of Education. Glad to be here. I can't believe it's already 12. Today's flying by a lot faster than yesterday did. So Rule 607 is before you today because of House Bill 81. So for those who don't recall, House Bill 81 was from Representative Winder, and it added mental health and behavioral health to the list of valid excused absences. Definitely in response to a lot of feedback he was receiving from constituents during COVID, very concerned about their children's mental health and how that was something that some schools were saying was not a valid excused absence. So he ran his bill, and in running that bill, he did not provide any definitions for what is mental health and what is behavioral health. And so internally, we had some discussions regarding what does that mean and what are the implications, and do we need to do anything about it to make sure there's some guardrails. So what you have before you is the answers to those questions we came up with, which is yes, we need some guardrails just in case. And here is what we came up with. Pull it up on the screen for you. So we added in a definition of behavioral health, and maybe I should back into this by explaining the issue that we're trying to prevent. And then you can weigh in on whether or not you think we hit it on the head or if we are completely in left field, and we're welcoming any feedback, so please help us out. But the concern we really had was, are some LEAs and schools going to feel an incentive to encourage parents when there is a disruptive student, especially if it's someone with receiving special education services, that rather than doing a suspension or an expulsion that triggers certain requirements, that they'll encourage parents to just come get their kid and use the behavioral health excused absence, and then not have all of those typical requirements, especially for the special education students, be triggered. So we wanted to make sure that this wasn't creating an unintentional loophole for that situation. So that's what the situation we're trying to prevent. So as you're reading through this, that's the lens that we used. We provided the definition of mental health was already defined in a different board rule, so we referred to that one. And then behavioral health is something that we defined as well, and something that is inside the umbrella of mental health. So mental health is the broad, or excuse me, the behavioral health is the broad, and mental health is a piece of behavioral health. So you'll see that behavioral health kind of has a big, large swath, and that was as we consulted with the school safety center in how to define these terms. They wanted to make sure we were keeping this broad and that mental health is a component of behavioral health. And really all we did, so this rule, for those who aren't aware, is a rule on truancy and absenteeism, and it really, the big bulk of this rule is requiring that there be a policy in place at the LEA level for these issues. So what we did add to this, we'd find those two terms, and then we are asking LEAs to look at those policies they have on absenteeism and truancy to ensure that this loophole that we're concerned about does not exist, and that their policies speak to that. In talking to Nate Dearden from the Special Education Department, as well as Leah Voorhees, there's a general sense that we probably won't see a lot of people trying to use this as a loophole, and there's a lot of checks and balances in place, so to speak, already, that this probably won't require anything new happen as long as we're doing everything we should in terms of the federal regulations, in particular with our special education students. So with that, I'll toss that back to you, Chair, and we're open for questions. I see Leah is here to also help if there are any specific questions.
Okay, question from board members, I should say committee members. AG Buse, your hand raised, and then we'll go to member Moss.
I apologize for not having read this sooner. I wonder if we could add in that list of individuals that the student is seeing the licensed behavior analyst. That's a professional now that works with parents or students. It's a private practice individual that assists and is licensed by DOPL to assist in behavior issues.
So with the recommendation, AAG Buse, that is a tongue twister, be to add somewhere that the student has to be, or?
No, just in the list where in the definition you say they.
Oh, yes, I see.
You see, they might be seeing a social worker, a counselor, a psychologist, a neurologist, another individual that is a licensed by DOPL that they likely might be seeing is called a licensed behavior analyst, or you could just say behavior analyst. And that's actually a DOPL licensed professional who works with those sorts of issues for families and individuals. Thank you. If you're okay with that, Chair, and
I'm okay. I'm glad you. I was just as I was reading it, I was thinking, isn't that person already kind of included? But it is no, they're not. Member Moss.
Thanks. Just a question as I'm trying to track these definitions. Mental health is defined or means the same as the terms defined in 277 625 2-2. I may have an old one. I'm just trying to see what that definition was for my own curiosity, but I'm not sure it links to the definition. As I've at least looked it up on the system, I see 625-2 sub 2 says mental health screening program or screening program means the same as the term is defined. So it refers it on to 53F2 522. That section is public education mental health screening, but I also don't see there a definition of mental health. I see definition of screening program. I'm just wondering if this throws us into a loop of trying to find what that actually means. That's common in the law, but I may be looking the wrong spot. Is there a simpler, is that linked to a easily accessed definition?
Yes, actually, I have it pulled up on the screen. There are many places you can go to look for administrative rules, and because you as a board actually choose rules all the time, the Office of Administrative Rules is that's where you're looking. Is not always the fastest in updating the latest versions of the rules, so we recommend going to our website. And I have pulled up on the screen the definition of mental health that is 625-2.
There you go.
I also did discover, just so everyone's aware, if you Google, you'll notice there's lots of drafts of rules that you'll see during the committee here, the board meeting, and all those drafts are public documents. So sometimes if you Google a rule number, you'll be pulling up a draft from 2 meetings ago, and it might not have things that are in it now. So we always recommend just going to the administrative rules page on our website to get the latest, most updated versions of the rules.
Thank you. Yeah, I did go through the main state site. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Committee member Hart.
You know, I'm really not too sure how to take this. I'm not sure what substantive it doesn't guide me in any way as a practitioner. I mean, it's so broad. If a student has mental health or behavioral health issues, it's now I'm not sure where I'm going with this, other than I get it. It just basically makes truancy a moot point. What is excluded, I guess, in the categories of absenteeism at this point? When would I ever say to a parent, this is not an excused absence?
Can I might, if I can help you here. The HB 81 was pretty broad. Yeah. And also our absenteeism and truancy, and well, this R277607 has been somewhat broad, and it puts more power on within the LEA to get down in the weeds on how, well, within the definitions, to have them define what is acceptable or not. And so one of my opening, I was going to comment, if you guys were going to comment, this is still broad enough that the LEA, they're required to have their own policy, and that they can choose to get as far down in the weeds as they want or need to for their particular situation. But I'm just giving you some of the background that was on this.
And it's more I don't know. I just don't know why I just look at this and, okay, your kid wasn't here, fine. We're moving on. I don't see a case where I would actually have any authority to say you're truant. I really think this law is way more of a game. And I'm not proposing any changes to it. It is what it is, but it really is more far-reaching than I think people realize. School is optional at this point.
And so to meet the minimum expectation, that's why you see the minimum that's gone into this rule, and then you compare this to the LEA's policy, and this is an easier one to come into compliance with and more specific. I can't even say that word anymore. Who wants to rescue me? Will be
specificity.
Specificity.
Yeah, I love saying that word before I got COVID. I've lost it, but it puts more of that. And then as a local board member, it, this was something that we looked at almost annually as we adjust ourselves in the realm of truancy. But it's just a little background.
Yeah, I get it. I think we really, this law really just changed the tide on school attendance. And I don't think we truly can comprehend that quite yet. And I just think it's something that needs to stay on our radar. And it's fine. I understand the philosophy. I understand that's where we wanted to go. And I'm not taking issue with that. I'm just saying that there's some far-reaching effects into other areas. School is optional, and it's up to the parent whether they decide to send their child or not. And we just need to understand that change in philosophy. Also, I just want to remind people that I have to turn my video off or else you all go digital. So I apologize for that. I know that's not ideal, but I can hear you if I turn my video off. Thank you.
We're glad to have you any way we can. I can't remember who was next. Was that you, Member Norton? And you're muted.
So, okay, there we go. I'm working without a mouse today and I keep hitting that mouse and it's not working. And I feel the frustration that Board Member Hart expressed, because it truly is, as you know, as we learned during the COVID days, it's really hard to educate when they are not there. However, from what I take from this is exactly what she said. You know, anything a parent excuses for is excused. And so now what we're focusing more on is actual truancy. You know, parent thinks their child's at school and they're not. That, you know, we need to address that. But I also I would speak in favor of this new definition that they're adding in. And I appreciate this new definition that they're adding in, because I feel that, you know, when we can get at the table and discuss behavioral health, just as we would physical health for why a child is not at school, and then we can come up with some, you know, I like that in here again, you know, it talks a lot about the plan, and the plan that the LEA has, or, you know, maybe more or granular down on the school level. But with the new wellness rooms, that can be something that can help bridge that into a full, you know, or more than full-time. No, not more than full-time, but up to a full-time attendance, where, you know, a student is, you know, maybe their first hour, maybe we can get that child to school if the first hour of the day they can be in a wellness room. Or maybe we're going to be able to keep a child feeling a little more balanced if they can take a break from the classroom so that they're not all upset and angry over something, go into a wellness room or go into, you know, some type of a situation where we can address the behavioral health at that point, and then they're capable to go back into the classroom and deal for a while. So you know, I think that by us at least taking on behavioral health and looking at it and discussing it and including it into the plan, that it might end up be that we can bring our attendance rates up. Whereas before, parents just like, they can't deal with it, I'm keeping them home. That was just my comment. And that I liked the definition inclusion.
Member Hutchins?
And actually, Member Norton pretty much said everything I was planning to say. I think the power that Member Hart's concerned about being taken away was taken away a few years ago. And this just gives us some context to be able to support and help the student more, hopefully. I do have a question in this topic about, and you can just, a general answer would be super helpful, but SB 219, the truancy enforcement moratorium. I'm hoping we get some better direction on that at some point. That one concerns me, how we address it as school leaders. So.
Sure, I could respond to that.
Yes. Director.
Yes, it's actually Board Member Hutchings, that's spot on. Senate Bill 219, for those who are not familiar with the bill by number, is from Senator McKay, and it was the truancy moratorium bill that just put a moratorium on truancies for the next school year due to COVID. And there's a piece of that bill that states that the moratorium is on punitive actions taken by the LEA. Are not allowed for the following year. And we are now receiving questions from LEAs, what is a punitive action? Yep. So we being myself, Angie, Sid and Patty, were just discussing this over text message this morning. And we're going to be bringing 607 back to you with a definition of punitive action probably next month so that we can have that parameter as well. And with that being said, and with Board Member Hart's comments, one thing that we can consider in terms of action for today is the reason why we did this rule this month was you have committee in May, and this will go to board presumably in June. And then every rule has to have a 30-day public comment period, which would be July. And so the rule won't be in effect until the first week of August. So that puts us right before the school year begins. And we wanted to make sure there were some guidelines, however broad they may be, in place for LEAs to rely upon when the new school year began. That being said, you could also hold the rule if you wanted to look at the definition of behavioral health and make it more specific and provide more guardrails that way. You could do that, and we could also add in punitive action. Or we can split those two things and just move this forward right now and bring 607 back with the new amendment next month. But I just wanted to kind of lay that all out there for your options.
Member Hart.
Yeah, I guess to flesh out a little bit more, I guess I feel the push-pull of being responsible for assessment and outcome data when we're releasing responsibility for school attendance necessarily, or making it easier. I'm not in disagreement. I just struggle. And I guess I want to segue over to the special ed piece. That is, I'm not just worried about schools saying, just pick your child up so this doesn't go against the 10 days. Before we, need to do a manifestation hearing or something. I'm also worried about a student not being in school enough days, and then a parent claiming that, there's a responsibility of faith that has been missed, or that we've not fulfilled. So I guess I did I hear that Leo, director, was on, Ms. Voorhees was on. I'd like to hear some thoughts from her on how this might play out, or what her thoughts are as it impacts the special ed arena. That one worries me. And the accountability, we push teachers with that accountability data. We see it in turnaround. And then we say, well, as long as they're having a mental, issues, then it's okay, it's excused. There's a lot packed in there. Anyway.
Dr. Voorhees, you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to try to address your concern, Board Member Hart, and we agree and are similarly concerned. And not just at the state level, just as a special education community. So as a result, we have provided some very specific professional learning to the special education field at our law conference, our annual summer law conference, and also in our monthly newsletter to special education administrators about absences. and how IEP teams need to consider the push and pull that you have articulated about when a student is absent and thus absent from his or her services and supports on the IEP, and the excusal or need for excusal of the absence versus if the school does not want to be responsible for the absence and the 10 days and the manifestation determination. And but also just in general, even if a student is home, to Board Member Norton's point, if a student is struggling and is home and it is excused, and we would all agree that this student is struggling and should be home, it is still the IEP team's responsibility to consider if those absences are contributing or are related to the student's disability and thus must be addressed in the IEP. So we completely agree as a community that that's a concern, and we at the state board have and are providing specific professional learning and technical assistance related to how do IEP teams conceptualize absences, excused or not, in relationship to a student's disability, in relationship to the student's ability to receive their services and supports, and or possibly needing more services and supports to specifically address the absence, or to Board Member Norton's point, the reason for the absence. So we agree with you, and it is a conversation that we are consistently having and do provide support to LEAs regarding.
Chair, follow up. I guess then in light of that, yes, I feel like we've made the mountain even steeper for our special education folks, because now that it's another consideration. I do like the idea of moving this forward as quickly as possible so that local LEAs and IEP teams, this kind of thing can be in their training, in their summer training. This needs to go forth very quickly. So I guess, Chair, are you ready for a motion? Is there anybody else? I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
Okay, then I would, whoever's driving, can you can you get my script for me, please?
It's almost there.
I'd like, yeah. I'd like to make a motion then.
To include when grandpa wants to take grandson elk hunting, that could, but my grandson wouldn't leave school we found the elk and he would not, 12 years old, trophy elk. No, I'm in school. No, grandpa. Okay.
I tell you, I swear to you that middle school kids in some ways are smarter than adults. I'm kidding. I'd like to move that the committee approve R277-607 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second final reading.
Second that.
We don't need a second in committee, so we're good. Discussion to the motion. I have one, Director Van Holten, because we made that behavioral analyst change. Do we change the draft to 2?
It would be draft 1 as amended, and then the board draft 2 in front of them.
So without objection,
So moved.
make the motion to say that the committee approve R277-607 draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
So moved.
Okay. Without any objection, any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We'll just,
Aye.
we get to have some fun with like the old way. Those opposed? Jim, did you vote?
He has left. I think it's a connection problem, maybe.
Okay, well, can we make note on there that he's not in our meeting, but the voting was unanimous. Okay, thank you. Let's see, Jeff, you're doing our next one. R277-600.
Yes. So the next two, 600 and 601, are both dealing with transportation and buses. And we do have Ron Litchfield on deck for any wonderful questions. I am not the expert on buses, and he is. So he will be here to help with anything you have in that realm. In terms of process, what we're doing here on Rule 600 is anytime an administrative rule turns 5 years old, the Office of Administrative Rules is required by Utah state law to wipe it from the books unless we tell them not to. So there's always a question after 5 years, do you want to continue using this rule or not? And the answer is yes. In this case, we would like to continue it. There are no amendments being made to this rule, so we're just seeking a continuation of it.
Okay, questions from committee members? I'm not seeing any. Can you pull up the proposed recommendation? Okay. Any committee member want to make?
I'll do it.
Okay.
I propose that the committee continues and approves R277-600 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
Okay, discussion to the motion. I'm seeing none. The motion before the committee is that the committee moves that the committee continues and approve R277-600 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, voting is unanimous. Please continue.
Okay, and then Rule 601. This one is the standards for Utah school buses and operations, and we are just doing a quick change on this one. For those who are unaware, this rule does what's called incorporate by reference. That's a legal term that basically means copy and paste. And because we didn't want a rule that was hundreds of pages long, we took the manual and we incorporated it into the rule. So this rule is actually quite short because the manual is the rule. And we just refer to the manual in this rule. And the reason why I bring that up is one of the formatting requirements from the Office of Administrative Rules is we have to state in the rule which edition of our document we're incorporating is the current one that is being used and is the law of the land because it's part of the rule. In 2020, in the latter part of 2020, the board approved an updated version from the 2018 edition. And we're just making sure we're changing the edition that is referenced so that is the current one that you approved in 2020. So that is all that this one is doing, is just updating the rule to be current with the manual that is currently being used.
Okay, questions from committee members? I have one for Ron Litchfield, and that is that manual, which is like a manual that we don't want to print off. How often do you update it, and can you give us a little background of that procedure and how you amend and change that?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm Ron Litchfield, the transportation specialist at the State Board of Education. And in reference to your question, we have what we call, we follow a national school bus standards, which is nearly a 700-page manual. And so back in 2018, we actually went through our state standards, and we actually reduced that from 115 pages down to 25. We removed anything that was duplication, and our state standards now only identify any changes or additions from the national standards. So to answer your question, the national standards are updated every 5 years. So every 5 years, we would be updating our state standards. And then other than that, there may be some other minor changes we would make, but this is probably a every 5 year update on a normal schedule.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Any questions from committee members?
Yeah, it's not a question. I just want to thank you, Ron. That's exactly what is just music to my ears, is reducing those manuals down and keeping it concise and not duplicating and making it easy to find things when you go from 100 and whatever you said down to 25. That is most appreciated. And I think that is, I don't know if Jim's back with us yet or not, but that's the intent of what we kind of want to see more of is that, and that makes, then going back to USIMS, it makes it easier for establishing those processes and being clear and communicating with others. I love that. Thank you for doing that.
And as I recall, our transportation directors were like this in the past, as in a way.
I'm here, Chair. Sorry, I stepped away for a sec, but I'm with you.
Oh, you're fine. Member Moss, we're on R277 601 right now. Any other questions? Member Hart, your hand's still raised. Not seeing any questions. Will you make sure this is in alignment? I don't know if Member Hutchings, if you want to get in the queue on any of this action in finance or not.
Sure. Happy to. So
You want a motion on this one?
yes, please. I move that the committee amend and continues R277-601 draft 1 on the first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table here. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. The motion is that the committee approves and continues R277-601 draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor say aye.
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 Jim, I thought I heard an aye. Were you in that?
Yep, I'm an aye.
Okay. Those opposed? Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I believe we're on isn't this our last item?
Yes.
I can't believe,
Yes, sir.
it's not dark outside. What's going on?
Don't tell.
Yeah. I haven't missed 3 meals.
Yay. Next, this is informational, and we have Aaron Bruff. You're going to be presenting this, aren't you, from Data and Statistics?
Yes.
Okay. It's a budget overview, correct? So who's driving?
Aaron, did you want to drive or did you want me to do the presentation?
If you could drive, that would be fantastic. And if you're ready, I will get going.
I believe, Mr. Bruff, we're ready to go.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Bruff. I am the coordinator over the Data and Statistics section here at the State Board of Education. It's a pleasure to be with you and just tell you about what I'm going to brag on my awesome team. It's not that I'm the awesome one. I have an awesome team, but talk about the responsibilities and duties that we have. I'll just go through the highlights and obviously entertain any questions that you have. We have quite a broad spectrum of activities and responsibilities that we cover. We do auditing, data quality control, and checks on the information that flows into the USB's data system. So we look at UTREX, we look at the warehouse data, we look, and we also look at other indicators such as the early literacy components. We work with our partners at on the school turnaround programs or the Title I programs of CSI and TSI. We look at a lot of that information and help the different departments as we review that information as it flows in, and help them do calculations behind that. Another area we're responsible for is working within the data gateway. The data gateway, if you're not familiar with it, is just a tool that is heavily utilized. Interestingly, just before this meeting, we were in a big agency cross section discussion about some updates that have to happen within the data gateway, and all of the components and the utilizations behind it, and trying to figure out a day just to where it can go down and come back up for the IT team to work on that. It was challenging, but again, just sharing that we work closely with a lot of individuals when they have questions about the data or permissions inside of there. We work with them. I work closely with the data governance group that's happening with the school privacy team, with the operation team and such. We also work very closely with each of the data stewards in the departments as they have them. We have a weekly meeting as we go over regulation changes, standards, and communication with that back out to the LEAs. And in communicating back with the LEAs, my team really kind of sits as a data liaison. When we talk with both the federal government, we're talking with CCSO or IMAC, or working with the Department of Workforce Services or United Way or UAPC, whoever it is. If they have data questions or concerns about it, we usually are interacting with them and helping them through those processes, including like any of the external researches that get approved by the board. We work with them to make sure we get both the data to them that we have, and then help them understand it when they have questions to come back in. EDFAX is it's the federal reporting component that the state is under obligation to send information up to the federal government. I work very closely with the IT team on this. Just both submit the information, but we also check the information that's involved that goes off with that, and then we do the annual CSPR report. We also work on the CRDC, which is the see if I can remember the acronym. Stands for the Civil Rights Data Collection. That actually is it's usually an every other year data collection the LEAs are responsible for. This year it's been postponed until next year, but we will be working with the LEAs to make sure that they can get their information gathered and submitted for that one. My team oversees the graduation and dropout rate calculations. This is for the federal four-year cohort graduation rates. We go through that, provide that information, and then communicate that back out with the LEAs. The metadata, basically definitions, documentations of the standards and the purposes of the data, what they mean, how to utilize them, the technical guides behind that. We pull a lot of the information, we pull all the information for the OSEP, which is the Office of Special Education Programs, as they go through that monitoring process. Again, we work very closely with the special ed team to make sure that they have the information so they can go through their monitoring process for that. Qualtrics is a data collection tool. Hopefully you're familiar with it. My team is responsible for the administration of that, the technical support and the training. And as we talk about survey development, I have a PhD, Dr. Wynn Shooter on my team, who is an expert on survey development. We're also rolling that out and helping make sure the agency understands how to utilize it. In addition, as we try to help other departments as these surveys or data collection tools go out, that we help and support them. Let's go to the next page. Sorry, it's a lot of stuff, but it is what we do. The next three sections really on the research. Anytime there's a research component that's needed, we do the data management and study consultation with whoever's working on it, or if it's internally, if we're doing it ourselves, we'll help the departments as they put those plans together. What is, how do you do a different statistical analysis? What's appropriate, what's not appropriate and such. And then a lot of times we will do the analysis, the evaluation and visualization of that information and try to share that out in a usable format for all partners or in all individuals involved with that. And then also we do a lot of reporting, looking at information and putting it out. Example, one that's happening right now is the disruption to learning because of the pandemic. What was the effect? It's a very large research project that we're working this year with Assistant Superintendent Darren Nilsson. Just a long process where we engage with them and help them get that completed. Anytime there's a data request that comes in, there's a portal on the Data and Statistics website for just general use data requests. I review those, and Whitney Phillips, who's the Chief Privacy Officer, reviews those, and then we approve them, and then we sign those out to different staff members. We also work, obviously, if there's a research request that comes in where it goes down to the personally identifiable information. Again, once it gets approved by the board, then it comes to my team, and then we work with the researcher behind it. We do have the monthly statewide data meetings with our LEA partners, talking about the currently it's the UTREX data submission, what is happening, needs, requirements. So for example, on the discussion that we just had, maybe two discussions ago, or maybe even three, talking about the mental health absenteeism. A lot of times there's technical questions behind that. We'll get involved and help with those definitions and help communicate understanding to the technical side, to the IT teams and the LEAs, of how that information needs to be submitted, and what we'll be looking at the state side. We're about in year 2 of the Common Education Data Standards Alignment. That's what the CEDS. That's a national alignment or national standard that we're trying to, that the board actually in finance meeting, and I don't remember what year, it was about 2 years ago, that was an adoption made. And so my team is currently working on looking at our legacy system, which has about 20 years of data, looking at those databases and doing the process to line those up. So when we say this is a student name, that means student name. When we say, like this address, when this is the assessment type, those things all line up. And so it matches through that system. And then what we're doing is we're working on this CIID component, which is a subsection of SEDS or CEDS, which is looking at just the special ed information and how we can automate the process. Again, all the information stored at the state board, but it goes through and automates the EdFax file. So we're in the process of updating and doing those components. We help the finance on statistical reporting for projections and such. Again, we're heavily involved with the October 1, the December 1, and year-end data submissions, and making sure that that information that comes in is accurate, it's clean. We work again with the LEAs to make any updates or changes. And then we help we sign off the information as it flows into the MSPA system, or the minimum school program. We also do all of the non-fiscal data tables in the superintendent's annual report. Again, it's what we do. Every year those come up. We administer the Tableau server, which is a new business intelligence tool that we have inside Azure, which is the development that's happening on with USIMS, working again in collaboration with IT on that. We just, for your information, about 15 new specialists were trained in Tableau this last week, and its utilization. So we're in the process of doing that system maturity work. We also house an IRB, and finally, we are collaborators with the Utah Data Research Center, which is housed at the Department of Workforce Services, where that is it's the SLDS, and it's not a new religion or an offshoot of the prominent religion here in Utah. It's the Student Longitudinal Data System, which a full system is basically early childhood. So it's pre-K through K-12. It's the technical colleges, the universities, and Department of Workforce Services. It's a large collaboration between each of the partners. And so we have a regular interaction with them and that group, looking at the research requirements that are coming from the federal government, well, primarily from the state legislature and just different partner agency research. So as we go in and try to answer therefore what's happening with our policies and decisions and such. So those are our areas of responsibilities. Any questions?
Yeah, Member Hart.
Okay, so it's probably too soon to joke about our bylaws, but this might be a longer request than 10 minutes or a nominal amount of time. So stop me, Chair, if I'm wrong, but what I really need is to circle back. This information is great. Thank you so much. I love data, and this to me, what you've described in all the program descriptions.
We're losing you, Molly. I have to lose your.
Is portion of.
Member Hart.
What's that? I hope that's better.
That is better.
Okay. I'm wondering if we can have an additional column, like circling back to USIMS, where these pieces are going or when they're going to be online. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know how these all fit with USIMS.
Oh, Katrina can answer that question. I was wondering if you're.
I was hiding. Yeah. So I actually have been working with Aaron on some of these conversations that need to happen. What Aaron is doing is things to keep his team afloat and keep everyone functioning as well as possible until USIMS gets to that point where we can have the discussions about these items that will eventually be consumed within USIMS. I mentioned in my report earlier that we will be working on the financial systems. We'll be starting that this summer. And I have full intention of pulling Aaron in on all of those meetings and really taking all of his time up.
I really need to understand, like I go to Data Gateway, but I never remember my password when I need it. And then I go to, then I've got to submit data for UTREX, and then I've got to submit data for, I can't keep track of all these things. And there are very few things that I'm not actually having to touch as a practitioner. And it's so much. I cannot wait until this is subsumed into fewer numbers of systems. So thank you so much for presenting this. It helps me understand the big picture. And I'm really excited about it getting into USIMS.
We are too. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for being available, Katrina. Member Moss.
Thanks. First, I just want to say I'm glad you're out there. This is so many pieces of information that are so helpful for people trying to make decisions. So there's a ton in there that's way over my head, but I'm glad it's in your wheelhouse. I just had a question about kind of hot button when you mentioned working with Superintendent Nielsen on some of the COVID stuff. Could you say a little bit more about sort of what you're looking at? We had a great report last month on some of what they were finding in terms of learning loss and demographics and pinpointing, areas of focus. Would you mind just a little bit more about what you're currently digging into there?
You bet. So when we look at that research project, to understand the impact of COVID, we are looking at one, what kind of schedule or mode of operation was the school functioning in for the majority of the year. So we've actually gathered that information, and we're working with on a side part of it, working with child nutrition because of the needs with the pandemic EBT fundings that it's money that actually goes to the Department of Workforce Services. So we're gathering what was the mode or the model or models is probably the more correct answer that each school used this year. Was it an online program? Was it a remote program? Was it a hybrid program? Was it in person? What did you do? And then in addition to that, how many soft closures impacted you? So that's identifying the schools themselves. We don't have that information down to the student level. So that's one component of it. The next component then is now we're going to start looking at all the assessments that will be coming in that we have at the state. So this does not include what the districts have been doing on the day-to-day basis, but the finalized information. So we're looking at KEEP, we're looking at the Acadience reading data, which is the K through 3. We'll be looking at the RISE information in the RISE system, the Utah Aspire Plus system. We'll be looking at impacts on course taking patterns. We'll be looking at the ACT information, and we'll be also looking at, again, it's a little complicated, but we're looking at the skip growth methodology, which will not be used for accountability or anything, but what can we learn from it? So the idea is looking at all of these multiple variables, can we see the impact of what happened in different programs? Did we see a gap forming inside of there that's larger than expected with certain student groups? Do we see across the board drop, or is everything normal? And we don't have the answers to any of these yet because the data they're not in yet. So that's the process that we're going through. Darren Nelson, we actually have it's about a 5-page document of these are the questions that we'll be looking at and trying to answer as we go through in this process. But that's the components and the different variables that we're gathering so we can actually do the research behind it. And in addition to all that, we'll be working with a lot of a number of the Wasatch Front larger districts who have the capacity to partner with. They also have an evaluation or research teams and looking at the information and do comparisons, saying, okay, what are you learning on a micro level? What are we seeing on a macro level? What are we seeing these different levels, and what can we have? What is the impact that we can see? So that's the project that we're working on. Hopefully that answers the question without actually pulling out every step that we're going through. And I can pull those up if you're interested, but.
No, thank you. I mean, that might be interesting to see in backup. It's exciting stuff, and obviously it's going to drive a lot of efforts to learn from what happened and what worked well, et cetera. I'm also working with ULEAD, which tries to pull some of that and then take deeper dives on, who stood out, and now how can we maybe research that a little bit at the operational level and see why it worked now that we know that it did work. So I'm eager to see some of that partnership as well. And do you know when some of this stuff? Obviously, that's everybody's least favorite question. I only ask it because it's exciting to know this stuff. But I mean, is this kind of some of this is going to be available to you during the summer for starting to share?
So yes. And by the way, I work with Mikhail Weathers on a weekly basis. So we work very closely with what he's doing inside of the ULEAD projects too. So the answer is, when will it be available? That's a varied answer. Certain things, obviously, we've already looked at the beginning and middle year Acadience data. A lot of things will start hitting or becoming available come end of July. What happens is we have the end of year data submission with all the enrollment records that comes in, which will give us a full picture of basically the enrollment and the demographic information on students and what schools that they're at. And then the rest of all those assessments then start getting loaded, validated, and put in. And so once we get the full data set together, again, end of July, that starts happening. So August, September really is running through the numbers, making sure that we have all of our information correct. Again, for example, the Acadians beginning and end of year, we've already done some evaluation and review on those. So my guess is end of September-ish is the different components should be starting to wrap up there. And then what we'll do is we'll put it into a summative document that Darren is working with some national interns, I believe. A partner that we've been working with, the Center for Assessment, to say, okay, how do we put this together and make sense of all of this information for the general public, for the board, for lawmakers and such. So it is going to come in staggered pieces.
Understood. Thank you. Right on.
Okay. Committee member Hart.
Yes, I'm just wondering how you're treating. Are you controlling for opt-outs? Are you what's your treatment of opt-outs if you're using RISE data? And are you running separate analyses on demographics of those? How are you controlling for them or treating them in that analysis? And I can take this offline too.
No, I can answer the question. It's a fantastic question and it's complicated. So when you look at opt-outs, it depends on the system or the accountability rules that have to be applied. So for example, if we were running a full accountability system for the ESSA, we would have to bring the opt-outs based upon those students who were enrolled in a course but didn't have a test. So that's how you bring them in.
Okay.
When we just do the evaluation, we will look to say how many students opted out, because we do have those codes on the test results if a test result comes in. But typically that's what we do, is we just make note these students didn't take the test, but then we typically do not bring them into the full calculation with basically an appendix saying we know that the opt-out rate or the percentage of students expected was this is the full amount that we have. So that's typically how we approach it. Again, it depends on, are we doing a statewide accountability system, or is this more with the federal requirement where opt-out has to be accounted for? And fortunately, we don't have to do that this year because there was a waiver on it. So that's a great question.
Yeah, I'd like to continue to know who's opting out and how that affects our data, because I'm concerned that students that we need data on are the very students opting out. So it's a hard question to get in that, design of data analysis, but I applaud you for trying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Member Hutchings.
Just a kind of a follow-up to the when question of the data, and I know you like to have really good, clean, clear data. to release, and I also understand it takes some time to make sure that it's the most accurate data you can have. At the same time, as I know school leaders now and through the summer are planning what they're going to do next year in relation to COVID, and what modifications and changes to make, what to keep, what to not keep, as far as some of the innovations and changes they made this year. Is there a chance that there could be any release of some even just general trends of what you're seeing in the data, or make sure we know it's preliminary data? If there's anything that really stands out as this was really effective or this really was not, is there? I mean, I would imagine, I know as a school leader, and I imagine most school leaders would like to have just any kind of guidance that you can give from the data in making some of the decisions of how school is going to look next year.
Yeah, again, preliminary data is, I like to use the word dangerous. It's because often it's taken out of context of what it is, and people forget that, hey, this was preliminary. And then they start making radical decisions based on something that could be pointing in a different direction. So when we have to do, because our job is, here's the official reports, those reports really do have to be cleaned and checked. Now, with that said, I have lots of conversations with all kinds of LEA leadership, with the assessment directors. I've talked with a number of superintendents, assistant superintendents, curriculum directors and such. And we're not hiding anything there, because they have a better idea of what's going on too. And they say, hey, when you see stuff, are there trends, whatever you're seeing there? And we can actually go in and start looking at those, but they are preliminary, and we are very careful with who has access to them and the understanding of what they're pointing towards, because like you said, we do have to have the information correct when we release it, because especially when it comes out from the office and represents you, we can't be pulling it back in and say, well, whoops, we made this huge mistake, let's put it back out there. We try not to do that anyway. It does happen every now and again, but so yes, when we see things, typically the LEAs notify us almost immediately, hey, we're seeing this trend, can you take a look at that? And that's when we start working in partnership on it. So that communication does happen. But the official stamp with your names on it, usually it's a little bit later.
I really appreciate that, and I had to ask.
Okay. Aaron, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Thank you for your presentation. We're all data mongers, but there is a price associated with that. We have all these wants, but then right now we have a trend not to ask. From the pushback from the LEAs and that, so it's a delicate balance. So appreciate you handling that. You and your team doing a great job with that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Committee members, you'd think we were going to be finished because that was our last item. However, there's an opportunity that I want to put a motion on the table. And that is a motion to reconsider R277-607 draft 1 to bring back. We have a little wordsmith thing that we've got to deal with. So that's my the motion, so you guys follow all the hierarchy of motions and parliamentary procedures, is in order to bring one back, we have to vote to reconsider. So that's my motion before you. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Thank you. Director Van Holten, can you bring up R277-6 07 draft 1 as amended.
Yes, Chair, I have that up on the screen.
We left a word out. Is that correct?
It is correct.
We briefed the committee.
Yes. It was noticed as we were looking at all of the list of things, we left off the word psychologist, which we definitely want to include because there are many school psychologists out in the field. So we wanted to make sure that we called that out as well.
So we need a motion. Would this be called draft? I'm trying to think.
That's a good question because it's draft 1 as amended and we're amending it.
We're amending the amendment, so it would be, wouldn't it be draft 2?
It would be.
Without an amendment. Okay, so I think I appreciate that catch. So next order of business would be that I would seek a motion. Oh, hang on. Member Moss.
Sorry, just one question. If we're trying to be inclusive, does the word therapist belong in there? Is that an old-fashioned word that doesn't apply anymore? I see counselors and social workers.
You have social workers, counselors, psychiatrists. Go ahead.
I believe that therapist is a more general term, but you have a specific type of therapist, which may be a psychologist, may be certified as a neurologist or something. I think therapist is a general term. I could be completely wrong, but that's my understanding. So we've used the right words here, and therapist would not be a right word because it would not be specific.
Thank you, Member Hart.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Voorhees, you have a comment on this? And then we also have Superintendent Dixon. So, Dr.
Thank you, Chair. To the point that Board Member Hart just made, there isn't a license for a therapist. There is a license for a counselor. There's a license for a psychologist. Yeah, therapist is the broad term. So these would be the license areas.
Okay. Superintendent Dixon, your hand was raised. I hope we'd hear your voice today.
But good afternoon. I'm kind of by phone and there's some work going on in my house, so I apologize for the noise. I just want, I think Leah took care of it, but when you put therapist in a rule, it tends to have a clinical perspective to it. And so just sticking with mental health workers and the categories that Leah outlined, I think works best.
Okay. Thank you. I believe it was Member Hart that made that original motion. So maybe I could say it like this, that I'm seeking a motion that the committee approve R277-607 draft 2 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
So moved.
Double.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, voting is unanimous. Thank you for allowing that to come back for be reconsidered. I believe that concludes our business today. Let me go back to our agenda, make sure I'm not missing anything. Well, we are finished. Board members, thank you for your work today, and a big shout out for your work yesterday. Thank you, staff. I know there's one other committee meeting. There'll be a little bit of a a break here before it starts. Again, thank you for your work, and I think we have an awesome board, and thank you for not kicking the can down the road yesterday and getting through our agenda. Thank you, and take care, and look forward to meeting with you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you
thanks,
all.
Chair. Thanks, everyone. Good luck,
Thank
Jim.
you.